Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The information provided in this video series is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute formal legal, financial, tax, or mental health advice. Navigating a divorce involves complex, state-specific legal statutes and deeply personal financial and psychological decisions. Viewers must conduct their own due diligence and consult with qualified professionals, such as licensed family law attorneys, certified financial planners, or registered mental health counselors, before making any decisions based on this content. Every single year in the United States, hundreds of thousands of legal unions are dissolved, yet behind the cold, clinical data of family court filings lies a silent, systemic crisis that the modern legal and social framework completely ignores: the total collapse of structural community support. We have built a society that knows exactly how to celebrate a marriage, with multi-billion-dollar industries dedicated to weddings, registries, and community gatherings. Yet when that same union fractures, the individual is abruptly cast into a social vacuum. Historical trends indicate that approximately 40 to 50% of marriages in America eventually end, yet an overwhelming majority of those individuals report feeling completely isolated from the very communities they spent years building. Imagine waking up to find that your social capital has completely vanished overnight. Your mutual friends are suddenly forced to choose sides. Your local civic or religious organizations do not know how to handle your presence, and your extended family structure feels strained under the weight of awkward conversations. You are left entirely alone to navigate a multi-headed monster consisting of complex family law, massive asset redistribution, and severe psychological grief. This is not just an emotional tragedy. It is a structural failure of modern American community design. Consider the case study of a 42-year-old corporate executive in Ohio who, despite having an extensive professional network and a seemingly robust social circle, found themselves sleeping on a mattress in an empty apartment, completely cut off from communal ties, struggling to understand why the local institutions they contributed to for decades offered absolutely no framework for life transitions. This structural isolation is the hidden catalyst behind why the divorce journey in the United States routinely leads to severe long-term financial depletion and prolonged psychological trauma. People do not ruin their lives during a divorce because they lack a good attorney. They ruin their lives because they lack a functional community structure to anchor them when their primary institution dissolves. In this deep dive masterclass, we are unlocking an open loop that most people do not realize exists until it is far too late: the secret architecture of American community structures, and how understanding these invisible social networks can completely alter the trajectory of your life transition, preventing the catastrophic loss of identity and capital that defines the average American divorce. What if the devastating toll of this transition is not an inevitable reality, but rather a direct symptom of navigating it without a structural blueprint? Today, we are breaking down the exact mechanisms of community support and U.S. community structures specifically tailored for the divorce journey. Over the course of this 10-part masterclass, you will discover the historical shifts in how American neighborhoods, civic groups, and legal frameworks have evolved, and more importantly, how you can leverage existing and emerging structural networks to protect your well-being, your finances, and your children. This video series solves the single greatest problem facing anyone undergoing a major life restructuring today: the lack of an actionable, community-based roadmap. We will explore potential outcomes of engaging with secular support networks, collaborative divorce frameworks, and structured peer groups compared to the traditional, highly adversarial, and isolating litigation path. You will learn how to identify structural gaps in your current social architecture and replace them with robust institutional and peer-to-peer frameworks that offer tactical, legal, and emotional stability. By analyzing detailed studies and evaluating the distinct differences in community resources across various U.S. regions, from dense urban environments to suburban and rural landscapes, this masterclass provides the comprehensive analytical foundation you need to transform an isolating legal process into a structured, supported journey toward renewal. To truly understand why the modern divorce journey feels so isolating, we must first analyze the historical evolution of U.S. community structures. In the early to mid-20th century, American society was built around highly dense, localized institutions. Religious congregations, fraternal organizations, local unions, and tightly knit suburban neighborhoods provided a built-in safety net. When a family faced a crisis, whether it was an illness, a financial setback, or a marital dissolution, these institutions automatically activated to provide material and emotional aid. However, Historical trends over the last several decades show a marked decline in participation within these traditional civic spaces. The modern American landscape is characterized by geographic mobility and digital atomization. Individuals frequently move across state lines for career opportunities, severing ties with extended family networks and childhood communities. Consequently, when a marriage ends today, the individual often finds themselves residing in a suburban subdivision or an urban apartment complex where they barely know their neighbors' names, let alone possess a network capable of absorbing the shock of a major domestic upheaval. This structural deficit forces individuals to rely almost exclusively on the adversarial legal system to manage what is fundamentally a human and social transition. When community structures are absent, the family court system becomes the default mediator for emotional grievances, which invariably escalates conflict and inflates legal expenditures. Case studies from family law researchers demonstrate that individuals who lack a robust, independent community support network spend significantly more on litigation because they utilize their legal counsel as emotional sounding boards, converting psychological pain into billable legal hours. This masterclass will systematically break down how to reverse this trend by establishing a parallel support structure outside the courtroom. We will examine how modern secular organizations, specialized support groups, and intentional co-housing or neighborhood networks are stepping into the void left by traditional institutions. Understanding these structures allows individuals to segment their needs, directing legal questions to attorneys, financial strategy to accountants, and emotional processing to structured community frameworks. Furthermore, we must address the specific challenges inherent in U.S. community structures regarding gender, socioeconomic status, and geography. The resources available to an individual navigating a divorce in a metropolitan area with access to nonprofit legal clinics, secular healing circles, and specialized mental health networks differ vastly from the options available in rural communities, where social stigma may still heavily dictate institutional support. We will explore how to audit your specific geographic and social environment to find hidden pockets of community capital. This involves looking beyond obvious friend groups to identify institutional resources such as community colleges, civic leadership groups, and specialized national networks with local chapters. By understanding the sociology of modern American communities, you can intentionally curate a network that mitigates the risks of isolation. This first installment sets the stage for a complete paradigm shift, moving away from viewing divorce as a purely private, isolating legal battle and toward understanding it as a major life transition that requires the strategic mobilization of community structures. Throughout the upcoming sections of this masterclass, we will provide the precise, step-by-step methodologies required to rebuild your social infrastructure from the ground up, ensuring that you emerge from this transition with your financial stability, your psychological health, and your communal identity fully intact. To understand exactly how to rebuild your social infrastructure from the ground up, ensuring that you emerge from this transition with your financial stability, your psychological health, and your communal identity fully intact, we must first confront the brutal reality of the immediate social fallout. When a marriage dissolves, the very first casualty is rarely the joint bank account or the real estate portfolio. It is the shared social infrastructure. Many Americans operate under the deeply flawed assumption that their social safety net is durable and unconditional, only to discover in the wake of a separation that their network was entirely dependent on their status as part of a coupled unit. Historical trends from sociological studies on American friendships reveal a stark and uncomfortable reality. The vast majority of adult social circles in the United States are constructed intricately around pairs. When that pair splits, the existing social architecture simply cannot mathematically compute the new dynamic. Consider a localized case study happening right now in the current landscape of 2026. Let us look at David, a 45-year-old project manager residing in a sprawling, affluent subdivision outside of Dallas, Texas. For over a decade, David and his spouse cultivated what appeared to be a remarkably robust community presence. They were heavily active participants in the Neighborhood Homeowners Association. They attended weekly community gatherings, and their social calendar was perpetually filled with couple-centric events, from weekend barbecues to holiday neighborhood block parties. When their separation became public knowledge, David experienced what modern sociologists refer to as the social contagion freeze. The community did not rush in to provide meals, child care assistance, or emotional anchoring as they absolutely would have during a physical illness, a job loss, or a natural disaster. Instead, they universally retreated. The neighboring couples felt an overwhelming sense of awkwardness, terrified of appearing to take sides, and subconsciously threatened by the immediate proximity of marital failure. David was rapidly and systematically phased out of the neighborhood group chats, the impromptu weekend gatherings, and the school carpool lines. Within 90 days, despite living in the exact same physical house in the exact same neighborhood, David became a complete social ghost. This is not an isolated anomaly. This is the standard operating procedure of modern American suburban structures. Imagine if you were suddenly dropped into a foreign country where you do not speak a single word of the local language, your passport has been confiscated, and you are simultaneously required to negotiate a highly complex, multi-million-dollar corporate merger. That agonizing level of disorientation and high-stakes pressure is precisely what the modern American divorce process resembles for the isolated individual. The immediate and most destructive consequence of this isolation is a severe financial hemorrhage. Because the traditional community structure has collapsed, the individual has absolutely nowhere to process the acute trauma, anger, and logistical confusion of the transition. Therefore, they instinctively turn to the only professional who is actively mandated to listen to them: their family law attorney. Historical trends in family court litigation consistently demonstrate that individuals operating without strong, independent community support networks incur drastically higher legal fees. They utilize their attorneys, who bill hundreds of dollars per hour, as highly overpaid surrogate therapists. They prolong mediations and escalate minor legal disputes over trivial household assets, simply because the adversarial legal process is the only structured human interaction they have left. By substituting paid legal counsel for absent community support, the isolated individual unknowingly drains the exact financial capital they desperately need to rebuild their independent life post-divorce. Furthermore, we must dissect the fundamental structural failure of our local civic institutions during this critical life transition. In the United States, traditional community pillars such as religious organizations, country clubs, and even local school parent-teacher associations are intrinsically designed for the nuclear family unit. When a divorce occurs, these institutions often lack any operational framework to accommodate the newly single individual. The individual immediately becomes an uncomfortable anomaly within the system. Friendships that were once solidified based on shared family life stages suddenly lack any common ground. The married friends are actively planning family vacations and discussing college funds, while the divorcing individual is navigating complex custody schedules, child support calculations, and emergency asset division. The rapidly widening gap in lived experience creates a silent, insurmountable chasm. People rarely maliciously abandon their divorcing friends. They simply do not possess the sociological tools or the structural vocabulary required to bridge that gap. This inevitably leads to the phenomenon of the divided network, where mutual friends attempt to remain perfectly neutral, which ultimately results in them pulling away entirely from both parties to avoid the inherent friction and emotional labor. The psychological toll of this sudden, compounding void is staggering, especially when amplified by the digital landscape of 2026. The human brain is biologically hardwired for community connection, utilizing social bonds to regulate stress hormones and navigate perceived environmental threats. When you systematically strip away that communal regulation precisely when the individual is facing the highest stress event of their adult life, the potential outcomes are heavily skewed toward severe clinical anxiety, prolonged depression, and catastrophic decision-making. The weekends without children, universally referred to by those in the system as the silent weekends, become a terrifying echo chamber of isolation. Without a scheduled neighborhood event, a supportive peer group, or a civic obligation to mandate social interaction, the individual is left entirely to their own intrusive thoughts while simultaneously watching their former friends continue their social lives on digital platforms. This is the precise moment when the most destructive decisions are finalized, from agreeing to heavily lopsided financial settlements just to end the immediate psychological pain, to engaging in deeply destructive personal coping mechanisms. The collapse of the shared community is not just a sad byproduct of the legal divorce. It is the primary catalyst for the long-term devastation that ruins lives. But what if this total devastating collapse of your shared social infrastructure is not a permanent tragedy, but rather a structurally necessary demolition? You are currently standing in the smoldering rubble of a community architecture that was never actually built for you as an autonomous individual. It was built exclusively for a version of you that no longer exists and can never return. The devastating loss of those highly conditional friendships and rigid institutional ties is the painful but absolutely essential clearing of the ground. Right now, in 2026, across the United States, An entirely new ecosystem of micro-communities, secular support networks, and highly specialized peer-to-peer frameworks is actively replacing these outdated suburban structures. These are hidden networks specifically engineered to catch individuals falling through the massive cracks of the traditional American social net. But how do you actually locate them when you are blinded by the trauma of the initial separation? How do you structurally distinguish between a genuinely supportive transitional community that will elevate you and a toxic echo chamber of bitterness that will drag you down? The answer lies in understanding the hidden geography of the modern recovery network, a highly structured blueprint that most people walk right past every single day without ever noticing it is there, and it is the exact framework we are going to expose and map out for you. The first step to mapping out this hidden geography is understanding the fundamental shift in American social architecture that has occurred leading up to our current year of 2026. For decades, sociologists have tracked the decline of the traditional third space, those organic public areas like diners, local lodges, and community centers where people naturally congregated outside of home and work. In their absence, a new, highly specialized framework has emerged out of absolute necessity, which social scientists refer to as the intentional transitional community. Unlike the organic networks of the past, which were built strictly on geographic proximity or lifelong religious affiliation, these modern networks are built entirely on shared acute experience. They are purpose-built infrastructures designed specifically to absorb the psychological, logistical, and financial shockwaves of major life restructuring. However, because they do not have large physical buildings with neon signs, the average person experiencing the initial trauma of a marital dissolution completely misses them, mistakenly believing they must navigate the entire terrifying ordeal in a vacuum. To see how this hidden ecosystem operates in the real world, let us look at a case study involving Michael, a 41-year-old supply chain director living in the rapidly expanding metropolitan area of Phoenix, Arizona. When Michael first initiated his separation, he followed the standard, highly destructive American protocol. He isolated himself in a sparsely furnished apartment, cut off contact with his former couple's network, and attempted to white-knuckle his way through the process using only his retained attorney as a guide. Within 6 months, the potential outcomes of this strategy became glaringly obvious. His legal bills were skyrocketing because he was sending heavily emotional emails to his lawyer at 2 a.m. His work performance was plummeting due to chronic sleep deprivation, and his physical health was rapidly deteriorating. Michael was essentially drowning in plain sight. Then Michael stumbled across the invisible architecture we are discussing today. He did not find a traditional support group in a dusty church basement. Instead, he discovered a highly structured, secular transition workshop hosted through a local community college extension program. This was not a space for unstructured venting. It was an educational cohort specifically focused on the logistics of life reconstruction. Through this initial node, Michael was suddenly plugged into a specialized co-parenting cooperative, a network of other divorce professionals in his exact area who systematically shared childcare duties during unexpected work emergencies or grueling court dates. He also found a financial literacy peer group specifically tailored for newly single adults, attempting to rebuild their credit profiles and manage single-income household budgets. Michael completely replaced his lost, couple-centric suburban network with an intentional transitional community. The immediate result was a massive reduction in his systemic anxiety, allowing him to make strategic, unemotional decisions regarding his legal settlement. This brings us to a crucial, life-saving distinction that you must master when rebuilding your social infrastructure. There is a massive structural difference between a constructive transitional community and a toxic grievance chamber, and confusing the two will absolutely destroy your recovery. The internet is flooded with unmoderated forums and local meetup groups that masquerade as support networks, but are actually echo chambers of bitterness. If you join a group where the primary activity is vilifying former spouses, exchanging vindictive legal tactics, and wallowing in perpetual victimhood, you are actively sabotaging your own future. Historical trends in psychological recovery indicate that prolonged exposure to these toxic environments dramatically increases cortisol levels, worsens clinical depression, and frequently encourages individuals to pursue highly aggressive, unnecessary litigation that drains their financial resources to zero. You must act as a ruthless auditor of your own social spaces. A constructive network is fundamentally forward-looking. You will recognize it because the conversations are heavily structured around tactical solutions, emotional regulation, and future planning. When vetting a local group or an online community, observe the operational dynamics. Are the senior members of the group actively modeling healthy boundaries and conflict resolution? Is there a designated facilitator guiding the discussion toward actionable takeaways? If the environment does not demand personal accountability and offer tangible strategies for rebuilding your life, you must exit immediately. Your time, your emotional bandwidth, and your financial resources are far too precious during this transition to squander on a community that wants to keep you anchored to your past. Imagine if you could walk into a room, whether physical or virtual, where every single person implicitly understands the exact bureaucratic nightmare of filing massive financial disclosures, the precise psychological weight of restructuring custody schedules, and the absolute exhaustion of maintaining a professional facade at work while your personal life is being audited by the court system. Imagine the profound biological relief of realizing you do not have to explain the terminology, the timeline, or the trauma, because the community already speaks the exact same language. That level of validation is not just emotionally comforting, it is a tactical necessity. When you are anchored by a community that validates your reality, you stop second-guessing your own sanity. You stop utilizing your expensive legal counsel as a surrogate therapist. You regain the cognitive bandwidth required to focus on your career, protect your assets, and be a stabilized presence for your children. The step-by-step methodology for mapping out this network in your specific locale involves looking beyond the obvious channels. You must investigate the continuing education annexes of your local universities, the specialized nonprofit legal clinics that frequently run parallel emotional support workshops, and the national secular organizations that have established regional chapters across the United States. You must intentionally curate a diversified portfolio of support, combining licensed mental health professionals, structured peer-to-peer accountability groups, and logistical cooperatives. You are no longer just surviving a legal process. You are actively architecting a completely new, resilient life structure. But finding the right community is only the psychological foundation of your survival. The truly revolutionary aspect of these modern American community structures is how they directly intersect with the hard numbers, the legal mechanics, and the financial asset protection strategies of the divorce process itself. What if the people in your newly constructed support network possess the exact strategic blueprints to bypass the most expensive, devastating traps of the family court system? What if this community could literally redirect tens of thousands of dollars away from legal fees and back into your own pocket, preventing the massive wealth destruction that ruined so many lives? The financial architecture of the collaborative process, and exactly how your new community support dictates your total financial survival, is the exact mechanism we are going to dismantle in the next phase. To truly dismantle this mechanism, we must first confront the reality of how the American legal system monetizes emotional isolation. When an individual lacks a robust, intentional transitional community, the family court system rapidly transforms from a legal venue into a devastating wealth extraction machine. Historical trends regarding the dissolution of marriage in the United States reveal a terrifying baseline. The traditional adversarial litigation model routinely vaporizes tens of thousands of dollars in marital assets, frequently destroying generational wealth and completely derailing retirement timelines. This financial destruction is rarely the result of highly complex corporate asset division. Rather, it is almost entirely driven by unmitigated emotional conflict masquerading as legal strategy. When you do not have a designated community framework to process the acute psychological trauma of a separation, you inevitably drag that trauma directly into the lawyer's office. Let us examine a highly representative case study taking place right now in the current landscape of 2026. Consider Robert, a 48-year-old structural engineer living in a rapidly gentrifying suburb of Denver, Colorado. When Robert and his spouse initiated their separation, Robert found himself completely severed from his previous social network, which had been almost exclusively tied to his spouse's extended family and their shared country club membership. Isolated and deeply aggrieved, Robert hired a highly aggressive, traditional litigator. Without a peer support group or a specialized transition community to validate his feelings of betrayal or to provide strategic perspective, Robert utilized his attorney as a highly overpaid emotional sounding board. Every single perceived slight, from a late text message regarding a child's soccer practice to a disagreement over the valuation of minor household furniture, was immediately forwarded to his legal counsel. His attorney, billing at $450 an hour, dutifully drafted hostile correspondence and filed aggressive motions for every single grievance. Within 8 months, before they had even reached a preliminary settlement conference, Robert had drained $45,000 from his primary savings account. He was completely liquidating his future simply to finance his present anger. This is the standard potential outcome for the structurally isolated American. They literally pay attorneys to be their community, and it bankrupts them. Now we must contrast this catastrophic failure with the emerging financial architecture of the collaborative divorce process, a framework that is entirely dependent on the presence of external community support. Collaborative divorce is not simply a buzzword for mediation. It is a highly structured, legally binding alternative dispute resolution model. In this framework, both parties sign a strict participation agreement, disqualifying their respective attorneys from ever representing them in contested court litigation. If the collaborative process breaks down, both attorneys are fired, and the parties must start over from scratch with new litigators. This creates a massive financial disincentive for posturing and aggressive legal threats. Instead of fighting in a courtroom, the parties work offline with a specialized team that typically includes a neutral financial professional, such as a certified divorce financial analyst and neutral mental health coaches. However, the collaborative process is incredibly demanding. It requires a profound level of emotional regulation, radical transparency regarding financial disclosures, and the cognitive bandwidth to make complex, long-term strategic decisions while sitting across a conference table from your former partner. You absolutely cannot successfully navigate a collaborative divorce if you are emotionally dysregulated, and you cannot remain emotionally regulated if you are socially isolated. This is precisely where your intentional community becomes your primary financial asset. Imagine if you were facing a grueling 4-hour collaborative session to determine the division of a complex pension plan and the equity of your marital home. If you are isolated, the fear and resentment surrounding this division will inevitably hijack the negotiation, leading to stalemates, increased billable hours from the entire professional team, and potential failure of the collaborative process. But imagine if, the night before that session, you attended a structured secular support group meeting. Imagine if you were able to thoroughly process your anxiety regarding your future housing security with a specialized peer-to-peer network of individuals who have successfully navigated that exact same fear. By the time you walk into that negotiation room the next morning, your emotional baseline is completely stabilized. You are no longer negotiating from a place of unmitigated panic. You are negotiating from a place of grounded, tactical strategy. Every hour of emotional processing was effectively billed at $0 by your community, allowing you to utilize your expensive professional team strictly for high-level financial structuring. This synergy between community support and financial preservation is actively reshaping how informed Americans handle life transitions in 2026. Forward-thinking community networks are now integrating sophisticated financial literacy directly into their support models. They are not just sharing emotional survival tactics. They are sharing highly vetted recommendations for neutral financial professionals. They are running workshops on how to organize your financial discovery documents before you ever pay an attorney to look at them. They are analyzing the historical trends of local family court rulings versus the potential outcomes of collaborative settlements, empowering their members with actionable data rather than fear-based rumors. Take the case study of Sarah, a 36-year-old regional sales director in Atlanta, Georgia. Upon realizing her marriage was ending, Sarah immediately circumvented the traditional adversarial route. She actively sought out an intentional transitional community, specifically designed for professional women navigating divorce. Through this network, she learned about the collaborative framework and was connected with a highly reputable certified divorce financial analyst. During the most volatile phases of her separation, when her former spouse attempted to hide the true valuation of a side business, Sarah leaned heavily on her community for emotional anchoring. Instead of retaliating with expensive, aggressive legal discovery motions, she maintained her composure, trusted her financial neutral to trace the assets methodically, and kept the collaborative process intact. The potential outcome of her strategic reliance on community support was staggering. Sarah and her former spouse finalized their entire settlement for roughly 1/3 of the financial cost incurred by their litigated peers in the exact same demographic. She successfully preserved her retirement accounts and maintained enough liquidity to secure a new residence without acquiring crippling debt. Your financial survival during this transition is not dictated by how aggressively your lawyer can fight. It is dictated by how effectively you can utilize community structures to regulate your emotions, bypass the adversarial court system, and retain control over your own capital. Building this parallel support structure is the ultimate act of asset protection. But while preserving your wealth and stabilizing your psychological baseline is the critical foundation for your own future, there is a vastly more vulnerable demographic that is entirely reliant on your ability to navigate this structural collapse. When the suburban safety net fails, the neighborhood networks pull away, and the traditional institutions lack the bandwidth to intervene. Who is catching the children? The absolute most devastating collateral damage of the modern American divorce journey is the total, catastrophic disruption of a child's social and developmental ecosystem. You may have found a way to shield your assets, but in the next phase of this masterclass, we are going to expose exactly how the system fails the most innocent participants, and more importantly, how you must urgently construct an impenetrable micro-community designed specifically to shield your children from the fallout and completely rewrite their developmental trajectory. When the overarching community structure of a marriage collapses, adults possess the cognitive development to rationalize the loss. But for a child, the dissolution of their immediate family unit is not merely a legal event. It is a catastrophic systemic failure of their entire known universe. Historical trends in developmental psychology consistently demonstrate that the most severe, long-lasting psychological damage inflicted on children during a divorce does not stem from the actual physical separation of the parents, but rather from the ensuing structural vacuum. In the United States, our society heavily relies on the nuclear family to function as the primary, and often the exclusive, stabilizing force for a child. When that force fractures, the child is abruptly subjected to a terrifying free fall. Their daily routines, their proximity to neighborhood friends, their participation in local sports leagues, and their fundamental sense of geographic security are all thrown into absolute chaos. They are quietly carrying the immense weight of an adult transition without any of the adult architectural support. This is precisely why building an impenetrable, child-centric micro-community is not an optional parenting strategy. It is an absolute developmental imperative. Consider the deeply illustrative case study of a father named Marcus, a 38-year-old logistics manager navigating a high-conflict separation in the suburban sprawl of Northern Virginia in our current year of 2026. Marcus initially assumed that as long as he and his former spouse maintained a facade of stability during custody exchanges, their 9-year-old daughter, Chloe, would naturally adapt. However, Marcus failed to account for the invisible structural damage. Chloe lost access to her maternal grandparents who had previously provided after-school care. She abruptly stopped attending the neighborhood block parties because the geographic location of her primary residence shifted across the school district. The parents of her closest friends, unsure of how to navigate the social awkwardness of the divorce, quietly stopped extending weekend playdate invitations to avoid interacting with separated parents. Chloe was rapidly experiencing a massive, unmitigated social recession. Her academic performance plummeted, and she began exhibiting severe signs of somatic anxiety. Marcus realized that shielding his daughter required entirely replacing the passive, defunct social network with a highly intentional, actively curated microcommunity designed specifically to insulate her from the logistical and emotional shockwaves. To construct this impenetrable shield for your own children, you must immediately abandon the outdated expectation that your pre-divorce community will automatically stretch to accommodate your post-divorce reality. You must become the active, deliberate architect of a new ecosystem. The first critical step in this methodology is identifying and securing neutral anchor adults. Children in transition desperately require consistent interaction with trusted authority figures who are entirely removed from the marital conflict. This means intentionally leaning into community pillars such as specialized pediatric counselors, dedicated school guidance staff, athletic coaches, and secular youth group leaders. You must proactively approach these individuals, privately inform them of the ongoing family restructuring, and explicitly recruit them to serve as stable, observant outposts in your child's life. The tactical execution of this involves a direct, boundary-setting conversation. You are not asking the school soccer coach to be a therapist. You are providing them with the situational awareness necessary to monitor your child for behavioral deviations. These neutral anchor adults function as critical pressure valves. When a child feels they cannot express their sadness or frustration to a parent for fear of causing more adult stress, the anchor adult provides a secure, non-judgmental environment for that emotional processing, effectively decentralizing the emotional burden away from the fractured home. Furthermore, you must strategically rebuild the peer-to-peer infrastructure for your child. The standard potential outcome for children who remain socially isolated during a divorce is a deeply internalized sense of shame and abnormality. They look around their traditional suburban classrooms and incorrectly assume they are the only ones experiencing a bifurcated living situation. To counter this, modern parents in 2026 are actively utilizing specialized co-parenting community hubs and local institutional networks to connect their children with local peer groups who are navigating the exact same transitional dynamics. Imagine if your child could spend their weekends interacting in structured, supervised environments with other children who intrinsically understand the logistical friction of packing a dual household overnight bag, or the complex emotional geography of missing one parent while residing with the other. This shared demographic experience completely neutralizes the isolation. It normalizes their new reality, transforming their external environment from a source of anxiety into a rock-solid foundation of solidarity. The structural execution of this micro-community also demands absolute logistical consistency across all external community nodes. A child's psychological security is deeply rooted in environmental predictability. When the internal structure of the home is legally divided, the external community structure must become the rigid scaffolding that holds their routine securely in place. This requires meticulous cooperative planning with your new support network. If you rely on a neighborhood carpool, a community-based childcare cooperative, or a newly formed network of single-parent allies, those schedules must operate with militaristic precision, entirely independent of any ongoing legal disputes or settlement negotiations between the co-parents. The child must never be placed in a highly stressful position where they are questioning who is picking them up from the community center, or which geographic quadrant of the city they are supposed to sleep in on a Tuesday night. By locking down the external logistics through a reliable, communicative community framework, you drastically reduce the child's baseline cortisol levels. You provide them with the necessary cognitive bandwidth to focus on their education, their friendships, and their personal development, rather than forcing them to hypervigilantly track their own survival logistics. The profound, life-altering impact of this targeted community building cannot be overstated. Case studies tracking the long-term potential outcomes of children raised in these highly intentional micro-communities reveal remarkable resilience. These children do not just survive the transition, they often develop superior adaptability, higher emotional intelligence, and a much more profound understanding of complex social dynamics than their peers from unbroken but highly isolated nuclear households. They learn early on that family and security are not strictly defined by a single residential roof or a traditional marriage certificate, but by a broad, interconnected web of reliable human support. You are essentially teaching them the most valuable survival skill they will ever acquire in modern America: how to proactively build structural resilience in the face of sudden, catastrophic change. However, the entire foundation of this protective microcommunity is built upon the critical assumption that you have the autonomy, the environmental stability, and the social access to safely curate these vital connections. What happens when your ability to build this protective shield is actively attacked by the very person who helped bring those children into the world? What happens when the community itself is leveraged as a weapon in the family court system, and your former partner aggressively campaigns to alienate you from the very institutions, anchor adults, and neighborhood networks you are desperately trying to secure for your child's survival? The insidious mechanics of community alienation and the precise legal and social countermaneuvers you must immediately deploy to stop it are exactly what we must dissect in the next part of this masterclass. To understand the insidious mechanics of community alienation, we must first recognize that the battlefield of a modern divorce rarely stays confined to a sterile courtroom. It almost invariably bleeds out into the suburban cul-de-sacs, the school pickup lines, and the highly active neighborhood group chats. We frequently discuss parental alienation in the context of family law, where one parent systematically manipulates a child to reject the other. However, a far more common and equally devastating tactic deployed in high-conflict separations is community alienation. This occurs when a former partner weaponizes your shared social infrastructure, deploying strategic misinformation to systematically dismantle your reputation, isolate you from local support systems, and effectively turn your own environment into a hostile surveillance network. In the highly connected digital landscape of 2026, where a single post in a homeowners association forum or a whispered narrative at a parent-teacher association meeting can spread like wildfire, losing control of your community narrative can have catastrophic legal and psychological potential outcomes. Let us examine a detailed case study happening right now in the Pacific Northwest. Consider Jessica, a 42-year-old healthcare administrator living in a tight-knit, affluent community outside of Seattle, Washington. When Jessica initiated a separation from her highly controlling spouse, she vastly underestimated his willingness to leverage their shared social network as a weapon of attrition. Before the initial legal paperwork was even filed, her former spouse began a meticulous, quiet campaign of character assassination. He did not explicitly scream accusations. Instead, he utilized the subtle weaponization of victimhood. He confided in mutual friends, local church leaders, and the parents of their children's classmates, painting a deeply distorted picture of Jessica suffering from severe, untreated mental health crises. He expressed fake, profound concern for her well-being to their neighbors, claiming he was fighting desperately to protect the children from her supposed erratic behavior. The result was a chilling social freeze. When Jessica attended her son's Little League games, the other parents physically angled themselves away from her. When she attempted to volunteer at the school, she was politely but firmly marginalized by the organizing committees. Jessica was experiencing a highly orchestrated structural excommunication, designed specifically to break her psychological resilience and enforce a highly unfavorable legal settlement out of sheer exhaustion. Imagine if you woke up one morning to find that the local barista who usually asks about your day now avoids eye contact. The neighborhood parents you have known for a decade suddenly remove you from the emergency carpool list, and your child's teachers speak to you with an underlying tone of suspicion. Imagine the absolute, suffocating claustrophobia of realizing that the very community you spent years contributing to has been completely hijacked and reprogrammed to view you as a threat. This level of systemic gaslighting is not merely an emotional inconvenience. It is a profound tactical emergency. Historical trends in family court proceedings indicate that judges and custody evaluators place immense weight on a parent's community stability and local involvement. If an aggressive former partner successfully alienates you from your local institutions, they are actively manufacturing a false reality for the court, presenting you as an isolated, unstable pariah who lacks the social scaffolding necessary to provide a healthy environment for your children. You must immediately deploy precise, counterintuitive social and legal maneuvers to neutralize this threat, and the absolute worst thing you can do is attempt to fight fire with fire. The instinctive biological response to being slandered in your own community is to immediately launch a counter-campaign, to corner mutual friends and frantically explain your side of the story, or to post lengthy, defensive explanations on local social media pages. This is a fatal strategic error. If you engage in the neighborhood whisper campaign, you immediately validate your former partner's narrative that you are erratic, highly reactive, and obsessed with conflict. Family law professionals consistently advise that the court system vehemently penalizes individuals who drag private domestic disputes into the public arena. Instead, you must master the discipline of radical silence and objective documentation. The first tactical countermaneuver is the strict compartmentalization of your narrative. You must completely stop trying to convince mutual acquaintances of your sanity. Let them go. If a neighbor or a peripheral friend is willing to cut you off based entirely on the unverified hearsay of a bitter ex-spouse, that person is a structural liability, not an asset. Instead, you heavily leverage the neutral anchor adults we discussed previously. Your child's pediatrician, the licensed school counselor, and the athletic coaches do not operate on suburban gossip. They operate on objective, documented observation. By maintaining a calm, rigorously professional and hyper-reliable demeanor with these institutional figures, you create an impenetrable, documented baseline of your stability. When your former spouse attempts to peddle a narrative of your instability to the school administration, that narrative will violently clash with the administration's actual, documented experience of you as a consistently present, deeply rational parent. The second maneuver involves the strategic utilization of your newly built intentional micro-community to absorb the psychological damage. When you are being socially starved by your former neighborhood, you must heavily feed your need for connection through your secure, specialized peer networks. You take the immense grief, the blistering anger, and the profound sense of betrayal caused by the community alienation, and you process it exclusively within the closed, confidential walls of your secular support groups, your collaborative divorce team, and your licensed therapists. You drain the emotional venom in a safe environment so that when you must walk into the school gymnasium or the local grocery store, you project absolute, unbothered composure. This relentless projection of calm stability is the ultimate defense against a smear campaign. Over time, historical trends show that an alienator's false narrative eventually collapses under the weight of its own inconsistencies when it is met with sustained, undeniable normalcy. By refusing to engage in the mudslinging, meticulously documenting your reliability with institutional anchor adults, and relying entirely on your specialized micro-community for emotional regulation, you strip your former partner of their ability to weaponize your environment. You secure the social perimeter. However, surviving the emotional and logistical collapse of your previous life is only half the battle. Once you have stabilized your social architecture and shielded your children from the immediate blast radius, you are suddenly faced with a terrifying new reality: funding this entirely new existence. The economics of transitioning from a dual-income suburban household to a newly independent, single-operator life require a complete reprogramming of how you view capital, credit, and daily cash flow. The exact financial blueprints, the hidden economic traps that newly divorced individuals fall into within the first 12 months, and the step-by-step strategy for rebuilding your financial infrastructure from absolute zero are what we are going to master in the next phase. To master the financial infrastructure of a newly independent life, we must first analyze the devastating economic phenomenon known as the household duplication trap. When a marital unit splits in the United States, the total cost of living does not simply divide by 2, it mathematically multiplies. Historical trends in consumer economics show that running 2 separate single-adult households requires up to 30 to 40% more capital than running a single, dual-adult household with the exact same net income. Suddenly, a single stream of revenue must independently cover separate utility structures, individual lease or mortgage liabilities, duplicate streaming subscriptions, and separate grocery accounts. For the individual who has spent a decade or more operating within a pooled financial ecosystem, this sudden shift causes a severe systemic shock. Without a highly calculated, step-by-step strategy for resetting your baseline cash flow within the first 12 months, the potential outcomes almost universally lean toward catastrophic credit degradation, rapid depletion of liquid cash reserves, and long-term debt accumulation. Let us analyze a detailed case study unfolding in our current year of 2026. Consider Thomas, a 50-year-old senior database administrator living in the competitive real estate market of Austin, Texas. Throughout his 22-year marriage, Thomas managed the macro investments while his spouse handled the daily operational household liquidity. They shared multiple joint credit facilities, a premier bundle of insurance policies, and a substantial mortgage on a suburban property. When the separation became official, Thomas moved into a modern corporate apartment downtown. He made the classic financial error of attempting to maintain his pre-divorce consumption habits while simultaneously funding his new rent and paying temporary household support obligations. He did not audit his automated subscriptions, he did not renegotiate his independent auto insurance lines, and he left his name attached to the primary joint credit lines to avoid friction. Within 6 months, his former spouse maxed out a shared credit facility during a period of high emotional stress, which immediately caused Thomas's credit score to plummet 70 points due to a spike in credit utilization ratios. Because his name was still legally tied to the joint account, Thomas was entirely liable for the debt, yet he lacked the immediate liquidity to pay it off because his independent cash flow was entirely strangled by his unmanaged duplicate living expenses. Thomas was operating in a state of high-earning financial vulnerability because he failed to build an independent fiscal perimeter. Imagine if you were suddenly handed the reins of a mid-sized corporation that was operating with completely unmonitored accounts payable, thousands of dollars in hidden recurring liabilities, and a credit rating that could be instantly compromised by an external third party at any moment. You would immediately freeze all non-essential spending, audit every single line item with a fine-tooth comb, and legally insulate the corporate core from outside liabilities. That is exactly how aggressively you must approach your personal finances within the first 90 days of a separation. The methodology for rebuilding your financial infrastructure from absolute zero demands an immediate, systematic separation of your fiscal identity. The first step in this educational framework is the comprehensive liability audit. You must pull a complete, 3-bureau credit report to identify every single active account that bears your Social Security number. Any joint credit card facility must be systematically addressed. In many cases, you cannot simply remove your name from a joint account. The facility must be frozen or closed entirely by paying off the balance or transferring the liability through legal agreements. If a credit card remains open for emergency child-related expenses, it must be governed by a strict, documented protocol, or ideally, replaced with a specialized co-parenting expense tracking app that requires independent pre-funding, thereby removing the risk of unexpected debt accumulation. The second critical step is establishing your independent banking perimeter. This means opening an entirely new checking and savings structure at a completely different financial institution than the one used during the marriage. Historical trends show that keeping your new independent capital at the same bank as your old joint accounts introduces severe operational risks, such as bank tellers accidentally misrouting funds or allowing unauthorized access due to outdated profile linkage. Your new accounts must be completely hidden behind modern multi-factor authentication systems that are tied to a private, secure email address that your former partner has never accessed. Every single dollar of your independent income must flow directly into this secure perimeter, completely uncoupled from the past. The third step is the construction of the single operator survival budget. This is where most individuals fail due to psychological denial. They want to maintain the illusion that their lifestyle has not changed, so they continue dining at the same establishments, outsourcing the same domestic tasks, and maintaining expensive club memberships. You must execute a radical, temporary lifestyle contraction. You must calculate your absolute bare minimum survival number, which includes housing, core utilities, basic nutrition, independent health insurance, and legal reserves. Every single line item that does not directly contribute to your physical survival or your legal protection must be ruthlessly paused. This is not a permanent sentence of poverty. It is a tactical defensive posture. By artificially suppressing your consumption within the first 12 months, you build an emergency liquidity buffer that keeps you completely insulated from unexpected legal spikes or sudden employment disruptions. Furthermore, we must address the critical process of independent credit rebuilding. If your credit score took a severe hit during the initial separation due to joint account delinquencies or high utilization, you cannot afford to ignore it. In the modern landscape of 2026, your credit score dictates your ability to secure an independent lease, refinance a marital home, or even pass background checks for new career advancements. You must utilize strategic, low-risk tools such as secured credit lines, where you deposit your own cash as collateral to build a flawless history of on-time payments. You must monitor your credit profile weekly, immediately disputing any unauthorized debt or inaccurate delinquency reporting that arises from your former partner's actions. Your credit profile is your primary economic passport. Protecting it is a matter of long-term survival. By executing this rigorous step-by-step financial protocol, you transform yourself from a financially vulnerable target into an economically autonomous fortress. You regain complete control over your cash flow, you eliminate the risk of third-party debt sabotage, and you preserve the precious liquidity required to fund your transition and protect your assets. But as you lock down your bank accounts, secure your credit lines, and establish your independent survival budget, you will quickly realize that financial autonomy is intimately tied to another major pillar of your life. How can you effectively manage your career, maintain your corporate productivity, and maximize your earning potential when you are simultaneously drowning in court-mandated financial disclosures, custody mediation sessions, and the profound emotional exhaustion of rebuilding your entire existence? The direct, high-stakes collision between your professional life and your personal restructuring, and the exact corporate survival strategies you must deploy to protect your income during a divorce, is the critical boundary we are going to cross in the next part of this masterclass. The critical boundary between your personal restructuring and your professional survival is where the vast majority of highly capable individuals experience their most catastrophic failures. In the United States, our corporate culture aggressively promotes the dangerous myth of the impenetrable firewall, the completely unrealistic expectation that you can endure the total demolition of your familial, social, and financial architecture at home, and then simply walk into a boardroom at 9 in the morning and perform with absolute cognitive clarity. Historical trends in occupational psychology and human resources data reveal a staggering reality regarding this transition. During the first 6 to 9 months of a contested divorce, an individual's corporate productivity typically plummets by over 40%. This massive drop in output is not caused by a sudden lack of professional skill. It is driven entirely by the severe cognitive overload of attempting to navigate the American family court system, which operates exclusively during standard corporate business hours, without a structural support system in place. When you are forced to secretly answer hostile text messages from a former partner during a client presentation, or review dense financial disclosure documents in a bathroom stall between strategy meetings, your professional reputation becomes highly vulnerable. Let us examine a highly detailed case study unfolding in the competitive corporate landscape of 2026. Consider Emily, a 39-year-old senior director of logistics operating out of Chicago, Illinois. When Emily entered the initial stages of her separation, She was terrified of the corporate stigma associated with domestic instability. She actively chose the path of total concealment. She isolated herself from her workplace community, refusing to utilize any corporate support structures, and attempted to manage her entire legal battle in the shadows of her workday. Her former spouse rapidly realized that her work hours were her most vulnerable operational window and began intentionally weaponizing her corporate schedule. He would send highly inflammatory settlement demands precisely 10 minutes before her known weekly executive briefings. Because Emily lacked an intentional transitional community to absorb this logistical warfare, she attempted to fight back directly while sitting at her desk. She began arriving late to meetings, missing critical supply chain deadlines, and exhibiting severe emotional volatility with her subordinates. Within 4 months, she was placed on a formal performance improvement plan. Emily was on the absolute brink of losing her primary source of income precisely when she needed that liquidity the most, all because she misunderstood how to navigate her corporate community structure during a crisis. Imagine if you were operating heavy, highly complex machinery that required your absolute, undivided attention, but someone was allowed to randomly walk up and unplug the power source multiple times a day without any warning. You would eventually crash the machine. That is exactly what happens to your executive functioning when you allow the unstructured chaos of a divorce to freely bleed into your professional ecosystem. To protect your income, you must fundamentally shift your perspective. You cannot view your workplace merely as an income source. You must strategically leverage it as one of the most rigidly structured community support systems available to you in modern America. The first tactical maneuver in this corporate survival strategy is executing the preemptive professional disclosure. This is where most individuals completely miscalculate. They either say absolutely nothing until their performance crashes, or they overshare deeply intimate emotional details with their managers, effectively treating corporate leadership as a localized therapy group. Both approaches are structurally disastrous. The correct methodology involves a highly sanitized, strictly operational conversation with your direct leadership and your human resources representative. You must frame the divorce not as an emotional crisis, but as a temporary logistical capacity constraint. You approach your leadership and state clearly that you are undergoing a major family restructuring that involves complex legal scheduling over the next 2 quarters. You preemptively outline your exact strategy for maintaining your core deliverables, but you establish firm structural boundaries around your availability for evening correspondence or sudden weekend travel. By controlling the narrative before your performance ever dips, you transform yourself in the eyes of management from an unpredictable liability into a highly proactive, communicative professional managing a known variable. Furthermore, you must aggressively audit and utilize the hidden architectural support within your corporate community. In 2026, the majority of mid to large tier American corporations offer highly underutilized employee assistance programs. These are strictly confidential, pre-funded community networks designed precisely to catch employees falling through the cracks of a personal crisis. Historical trends show that individuals who immediately activate their corporate assistance programs dramatically reduce their risk of termination. These programs often provide critical, localized resources, including free initial legal consultations, emergency childcare referrals, and heavily subsidized access to clinical psychologists who specialize in high-stress life transitions. Instead of spending your precious liquid capital on these services, you seamlessly redirect that financial burden onto the corporate infrastructure. The next vital strategy is implementing the legal quarantine protocol. As previously established, the family court system will aggressively demand your attention during your most critical working hours. If you allow your legal counsel to dictate your daily schedule, you will lose your job. You must structurally mandate how and when your legal team interacts with you. You instruct your attorney that, barring an absolute physical emergency involving your children, you will only review legal documents or discuss case strategy during highly specific, predetermined time blocks, such as your Tuesday and Thursday lunch hours. You turn off all email and text notifications from your legal team outside of these designated windows. If your former partner attempts to bypass this quarantine by bombarding your personal phone during the workday, you rely on the external microcommunity you built in the previous phases. You literally hand the logistical monitoring of those incoming communications over to a trusted peer in your support network, or a neutral co-parenting application that suppresses notifications until your workday is complete. You must ruthlessly protect your cognitive bandwidth during corporate hours, treating your professional focus as a highly guarded asset. When Emily, our logistics director in Chicago, finally abandoned her strategy of concealment and implemented this exact structural blueprint. The potential outcomes completely reversed. She accessed her corporate assistance program to secure a temporary, subsidized childcare provider to manage unexpected school closures, removing that friction from her workday. She instituted a strict legal quarantine, forcing her attorney to compile all communications into a single Friday afternoon briefing. By strategically leaning into her workplace as a supportive community structure rather than viewing it as a hostile environment to hide from, she stabilized her performance metrics, successfully exited her performance improvement plan, and secured the exact corporate bonus she desperately needed to fund her new independent lease. You have now built a psychological shield for your children, you have locked down your independent financial perimeter, and you have successfully insulated your corporate income from the blast radius of your separation. You are fully functioning as a financially autonomous individual, but there is a massive, highly dangerous vulnerability that still remains. At the end of that highly structured, fiercely protected corporate workday, you still have to drive your car to a physical location, unlock a door, and sit entirely alone in a space. The sheer environmental psychology of your new physical residence, the terrifying isolation of the transitional apartment, and the exact step-by-step methodology for designing a new geographic community structure that prevents catastrophic emotional regression is the critical architecture we are going to build in the next phase. To build this critical architecture, we must first confront the brutal environmental psychology of the transitional physical space. When you sign the lease on a new apartment or close on a downsized townhouse, the immediate physical transition is often celebrated by society as a fresh start, but the biological reality of your nervous system tells a completely different story. Historical trends in environmental psychology consistently demonstrate that humans are deeply territorial creatures who rely on familiar spatial cues to regulate their internal emotional state. For years or perhaps decades, your brain was mapped to a specific geographic ecosystem. You knew the exact acoustic sound of the front door closing, the specific lighting of the kitchen at dawn, and the precise routine of your neighborhood commute. When you are abruptly transplanted into a completely sterile, unfamiliar environment, often devoid of your primary physical assets and isolated from your traditional community, your brain perceives this not as a fresh start, but as a severe ecological threat. This triggers a perpetual state of low-grade fight-or-flight arousal, which is the precise biological catalyst for the catastrophic emotional regression that strikes newly divorced individuals during their first 6 months of independent living. Let us examine a highly representative case study, occurring right now in the rapidly shifting demographic landscape of 2026. Consider Daniel, a 44-year-old software architect navigating a complex separation in the Research Triangle of Raleigh, North Carolina. After moving out of his marital home, Daniel secured a highly efficient, modern apartment in a dense urban corridor. However, overwhelmed by the sheer logistical exhaustion of the legal process, Daniel fell into the most common and destructive environmental trap of the divorce journey, the transient mindset. For the first 5 months of his lease, Daniel refused to fully unpack. He lived out of heavily taped cardboard boxes, he did not hang a single piece of art on the walls, and he utilized highly temporary, folding furniture. He subconsciously treated his new residence as a waiting room for a life that had already ended, rather than the permanent headquarters of his new existence. The potential outcomes of this environmental neglect were devastating. Every single time Daniel returned to his apartment after a grueling corporate workday or a highly combative mediation session, his physical environment visually reinforced a narrative of displacement, failure, and impermanence. His home offered absolutely no psychological relief, leading to severe insomnia, localized anxiety, and a complete inability to emotionally recharge. Furthermore, when his children visited for his designated custody weekends, they instinctively absorbed this transient energy, feeling like temporary guests in a sterile hotel rather than secure residents in their father's home. Imagine if, instead of treating your new physical residence as a monument to your displacement, you strategically designed it as an impenetrable sanctuary engineered specifically for your neurological recovery. You must immediately eradicate the transient mindset by executing a rapid, ruthless spatial integration protocol. Within 72 hours of taking possession of your new space, every single box must be unpacked and removed from your visual field. You are not allowed to live in a storage unit. You must intentionally select sensory anchors that bridge the gap between your past stability and your future autonomy. This involves deploying specific lighting, familiar textiles, and structured organizational systems that immediately signal to your brain that this environment is controlled, safe, and permanently yours. For your children, this spatial architecture is even more critical. Their designated areas must be immediately established with absolute permanence, containing their preferred sensory anchors and a highly visible, predictable routine chart. When they walk through the door, the physical environment must instantly communicate that this micro-community is completely structurally sound. But stabilizing the interior of your residence is only the first defensive perimeter. The most crucial step in designing your new geographic community structure is actively conquering the exterior environment, a process sociologists refer to as force propinquity. Propinquity is the physical proximity between people that dictates the likelihood of social ties forming. When you were married in the suburbs, propinquity happened automatically through neighborhood block parties and school bus stops. In the atomized landscape of a new transitional apartment or a quiet, unfamiliar street, propinquity must be actively manufactured. You cannot wait inside your securely designed apartment for a community to organically discover you. You must systematically map out and integrate yourself into the hyperlocal third spaces of your new geography. The step-by-step methodology for this geographic integration requires treating your new neighborhood like a tactical grid. Within the first 2 weeks, you must identify 3 distinct, secular third spaces within a 1-mile radius of your residence. This could be a highly trafficked local bakery, a municipal community garden, or a neighborhood recreational facility. You must establish a rigid, unvarying geographic rhythm. You do not just visit these locations randomly. You visit them on the exact same days at the exact same times every single week. You go to the community fitness center every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 6 in the morning. You visit the local coffee shop every Saturday at exactly 8. By forcing this predictable geographic rhythm, you transform yourself from an anonymous transient into a recognized local fixture. You force the environmental propinquity that leads to micro-interactions with local business owners, baristas, and fellow regular patrons. These micro-interactions are the foundational building blocks of a new geographic safety net. Over the course of 3 to 4 months, these repeated, low-stakes exposures organically evolve into authentic neighborhood recognition, permanently shattering the isolation of the transitional space and replacing it with a localized physical community structure that anchors your daily reality. You must also aggressively leverage the digital geographic tools specific to 2026 to accelerate this physical integration. You do not utilize local neighborhood applications to engage in toxic community gossip or neighborhood disputes. Instead, you utilize them strictly to identify hyperlocal utility networks. You look for neighborhood cooperative initiatives, local tool-sharing libraries, or organized volunteer cleanup groups. By actively participating in the maintenance and elevation of your new physical geography, you establish immediate social equity with your new neighbors. You are signaling to the local ecosystem that you are a highly invested, permanent contributor, rather than a fractured individual seeking refuge. This geographic integration completes the defensive architecture. You have shielded your children, protected your capital, stabilized your corporate income, and now you have successfully rooted yourself into a thriving localized physical community. You have spent months, perhaps years, meticulously constructing this impenetrable fortress of support to survive the grueling attrition of the legal system. You have learned to regulate your nervous system, bypass the adversarial traps of the family court, and redefine your daily existence. But a massive, invisible threshold is rapidly approaching. Eventually, the mediations conclude, the final disclosures are filed, and a judge strikes a gavel, dissolving the legal contract of your past life forever. The war is officially over. You are handed a finalized decree, and suddenly, the adrenaline that has fueled your survival for the past year instantly evaporates. What happens on day 1 of your permanently new life when the structure of the crisis is entirely removed? How do you prevent the catastrophic post-adrenaline crash that derails so many survivors? And exactly how do you transition this massive community architecture from a defensive survival mechanism into a proactive engine for profound personal reinvention? The final evolution of your post-divorce identity, and the exact roadmap for the rest of your life, is the ultimate paradigm shift we are going to master in the final phase. To transition this massive community architecture from a defensive survival mechanism into a proactive engine for profound personal reinvention, we must first address the silent psychological phenomenon known as the post-decree exhaustion crash. When the final signature is stamped by the family court judge and the legal dissolution of your marriage is permanently finalized, Your immediate expectation is an overwhelming sense of relief and liberation. However, historical trends in trauma recovery reveal that the exact opposite frequently occurs. For months or perhaps years, your biological system has been operating on an elevated chemical cocktail of adrenaline, cortisol, and hypervigilance just to sustain you through financial disclosures, custody negotiations, and the reconstruction of your living spaces. The legal decree acts as a sudden, absolute termination of that conflict. When that external pressure abruptly drops to zero, your nervous system experiences a severe systemic deflation. The survival fuel runs out, leaving you face to face with a deep, compounding exhaustion and a profound identity vacuum. This is the precise moment where the risk of emotional regression is highest, as individuals often mistake this natural biological crash for a failure of their recovery, causing them to slip backward into isolation or attempt to fill the void with reckless, impulsive lifestyle changes. Consider a detailed case study unfolding right now in the current landscape of 2026. Let us look at Christopher, a 46-year-old senior systems director living in Denver, Colorado. Christopher successfully deployed every structural defense outlined in this masterclass. He protected his corporate assets, insulated his 2 children from the legal fallout by building a robust micro-community of neutral anchor adults, and established a flawless independent banking perimeter. On the afternoon his attorney emailed him the finalized divorce decree, Christopher expected to celebrate. Instead, he sat on his couch and felt a crushing, unyielding weight of fatigue. Over the next 6 weeks, without the daily operational demands of a legal battle to focus his energy, Christopher found himself disoriented. The defensive community structures he had built, his support groups and his legal consults, were engineered for crisis management, not for peace. Christopher realized that surviving the storm was only phase 1. He now had to actively reprogram his entire community architecture to support a forward-looking, independent identity, shifting his social ecosystem from a shelter into a launching pad. Imagine if you spent years meticulously constructing a high-tech armored vehicle to navigate a hostile territory, only to successfully cross the border into a peaceful, open landscape. If you keep driving that heavily armored tank through quiet city streets, you will ruin the infrastructure, burn through your resources, and remain perpetually isolated behind thick steel walls. You must have the courage to step out of the armor and intentionally design a completely new vehicle built for speed, exploration, and long-term utility. The methodology for this ultimate identity shift requires a systematic 3-step protocol to transition your support networks from crisis mode to growth mode. The first step in this evolutionary framework is the intentional decommissioning of the crisis narrative. During the acute phase of your separation, it was structurally necessary to discuss the details of your legal battle, your financial constraints, and your co-parenting friction within your support networks. That repetition was a vital tool for emotional processing. However, once the decree is finalized, allowing that narrative to remain the central focus of your social interactions will permanently anchor you to your past trauma. You must actively recontract your relationships with your transitional community. This means entering your peer groups and explicitly stating that the legal chapter is closed, and that your focus is shifting entirely toward personal development, career acceleration, and long-term lifestyle design. You transition the group dynamic from a space of shared grief into a high-level mastermind network focused on accountability, health optimization, and wealth generation. If certain members of your transitional network are unable or unwilling to make this pivot, remaining perpetually stuck in a cycle of bitterness and legal resentment, you must gracefully distance yourself. Your social architecture must always look forward, never backward. The second critical step is the activation of the generative community node. True personal reinvention requires you to move from being a consumer of community support to an active producer of community value. Historical trends in psychological resilience indicate that the fastest path to fully integrating a traumatic life transition is mentoring others who are currently entering the exact storm you just survived. You begin strategically offering your learned experience to the newer members of your secular support networks, your civic organizations, or your local community hubs. You become the stable, rational anchor for someone else who is currently drowning in the initial shock of a separation. This act of altruistic leadership completely rewrites your internal identity script. You are no longer the victim of a broken marriage or the survivor of a grueling legal process. You are a highly capable, battle-tested leader possessing valuable social capital. By actively mentoring others, you solidify your own recovery, reinforce your financial and emotional boundaries, and build an impenetrable layer of self-efficacy that permanently protects your new life structure. The third step is the systematic cultivation of expansion networks. Now that your independent baseline is locked down, you must intentionally diversify your social capital beyond the boundaries of your transition experience. You begin injecting yourself into high-skill, forward-looking communities that are completely untethered to your past life or your divorce journey. This involves strategically joining executive leadership cohorts, advanced financial investment clubs, specialized athletic training groups, or creative cultural institutions in your new physical geography. These expansion networks provide a blank slate for your identity. The individuals within these spaces do not know you as a divorced professional or a single parent. They know you strictly as an ambitious, high-performing peer. This allows you to test and refine new versions of your personality, your goals, and your lifestyle without the weight of past expectations. You are effectively weaving a vast, multi-layered social tapestry that provides infinite pathways for personal and professional advancement. The potential outcomes of executing this comprehensive, 10-part community blueprint are profound. You transform what is universally feared as the most destructive crisis of an adult life into a masterclass in structural resilience. By understanding the sociology of modern American institutions, you systematically insulate your children from developmental trauma, preserve your financial liquidity from the wealth extraction of the adversarial court system, and maintain your peak performance within the corporate landscape. You emerge from the ashes of a collapsed marriage not as a fragmented individual attempting to patch together a broken existence, but as a hyper-autonomous, deeply rooted, and economically fortified force perfectly aligned for the next 30 years of your life. But as you stand securely within this newly constructed fortress of independence, fully integrated into your new neighborhood, your new corporate trajectory, and your new growth masterminds, a massive new horizon begins to appear. You have successfully mastered the architecture of the single operator life. You have proven you can survive, thrive, and lead completely on your own terms. But what happens when you finally decide to open the gates of this fortress once again? How do you safely navigate the high-stakes world of modern relationships, dating, and blended family structures in our highly complex social landscape, without compromising a single millimeter of the financial security and emotional autonomy you fought so hard to build? The hidden psychological screening protocols, the exact asset protection relationship frameworks, and the strategic blueprint for integrating new partnerships into your established micro-community without destabilizing your children or your capital is an entirely new frontier of human architecture, and it is the exact blueprint we are opening up next.